Fred Wilkinson, Chief Editor of the National Provisioner. Today I'm speaking with Jose de Jesus. He is the Vice President of Market Growth for the National Pork Board. Jose, thank you for joining me today. So NPB has a new promotional outreach effort aimed at Hispanic consumers. What can you tell us about that effort?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me, Fred. Appreciate the time. Just recently we launched our new Hispanic brand campaign into the marketplace, and this campaign is really aimed at really getting getting to connect a little bit more deeply with Hispanic consumers in the U.S. Right, as you can imagine, pork pork is king in the Latin community, and so this campaign aims to build that kind of relationship deeper with the consumer, and we're excited about this. The tagline that we introduced, it's Explora Todo el gusto del pork, which really doesn't translate very well in English, as you can imagine, but really speaks about the exploration of the taste and flavor of pork, right? And it sounds a lot better in Spanish, I can assure you of that. But the whole campaign is really aimed to as a way to connect deeper with the consumer, but also how do we get Hispanic consumer to explore farther with the product? You know, the challenge here is not necessarily getting Hispanic consumers to try pork. They're already eating a lot of pork, but it's really how do we get them deeper into the category, deeper into the portfolio, right? To try different types of cuts. How do we move away from special occasion to everyday occasion? And I think there's a huge opportunity for pork, and we're excited about that. I think we have a very solid strategy that really taps into that tradition, and that is very important for Hispanic consumers, and the authenticity of it, right? Looking for authentic dishes, flavors that are very relevant in our culture. And I say our culture because I'm Latino myself, so I include myself there. But it's just really exciting. I think there's a huge opportunity to drive long-term demand. That's our ultimate goal. When you think about the consumption of pork in this country, Hispanic consumers over-index in consumption, so they're critical to the pork industry. It's about 20% of the population, but the consumption is really high, the penetration. So we're looking to fish where the fish are, and really continue to build a great relationship with a very key and important consumer of pork.
What are some needs of today's Hispanic consumers that this campaign is seeking to tap into?
Yeah, aside from authentic dishes, right? I think if you're Hispanic, I think, yeah, you like to explore different cultures and things, but you're also looking for authenticity, something that kind of brings you back home, right? But I would say two that come to mind that are very critical is convenience and easy to prepare. Uh, you know, our target audience for this particular effort is a younger consumer. So think about the Gen Zs and the millennial. And so consumers don't have a lot of time. Younger consumers don't have a lot of time. So it's got to be tasty. It's got to taste amazing. It has to be convenient in terms of, you know, meeting their needs, if you will. And it's got to be easy to make, easy to prepare. People are on the go. They have a lot of responsibilities. They might have to go to a sporting event at night when they get home from work. And so really, how do we make sure that pork is part of that occasion, right? So convenience is huge, is key, as well easy to prepare.
What types of in-store promotional efforts will accompany this promotion?
Yeah, this particular campaign, it's a digital first campaign, right? So think about a lot of the content that we put out is in spaces where the younger consumer spends a lot of their time. So think about social media, digital channels, but we're also working. Our team is also working with some key Hispanic retailers in key markets. So think about markets like Chicago, LA, Houston, Dallas, for example. Those are very, very important markets. Phoenix is another market. And I'll tell you in a little bit why they're important as well. But so there's a lot of retailers in those markets that cater to the Hispanic community, right? So our team is working with those retailers in those markets to be able to extend the campaign and do things like point of sale. They're interested in a lot of the content that we put out so they can use it as well and be able to cater content to those consumers to draw them into the stores. As you can imagine, for retailers, if you can get to that younger generation and get them into the store, that's a challenge that a lot of retailers go through, right? Or are going through. How do I get that younger consumer into my stores? And so we're trying to help there as well. How do we get them into those stores? And I think, by prioritizing pork and really adopting a lot of the work that we're doing at the national level, we hope to engage with a lot of those retailers. I mentioned some of those key markets before. They're critical for our success. And the reason is when you think about our strategy right now, it's heavily focused on Mexican American consumers. The reason for that is because when you think about the numbers of Hispanics in this country, about 60 to 65% are Mexican descent. So we're going to markets in which the consumer represents that fact, right? That they're very heavily Mexican Americans. Consumption is really high in those markets as well. So part of our strategy is, I mentioned fishing where the fish are. So how do we show up in places where this consumer is very prevalent, has an affinity for the product? And then how do we engage with them, right? So this is not necessarily a blanketed approach, 50 states or anything like that. It's really identifying where the Hispanics are, and then how do we show up in a way that we can meet their needs.
What are some unique aspects of product and packaging preferences among Hispanic consumers?
Yeah, so I think unique things are the way they use the product as an ingredient, right? Not so much center of the plate. When you go to a Hispanic store, you see a lot of pork being featured as an ingredient for tacos and soups and things like that, stews, right? Like even you see ribs cut really, really small, and they use the ribs to enhance their soup, right? And so that's one aspect of it. I think packaging that calls out authenticity is critical. And the reason for that is because they want to feel like they're being heard and somebody's catering to them. So, calling the authenticity, the flavors, when you go to a place to buy something that kind of features the flavors that you're familiar with or you grew up with when your grandma or your aunt or uncle made some of those awesome dishes. So, how do we really start calling that out? I think that's really, really important. So think about like al pastor marinade, right? It's just huge, right? Al pastor tacos are king in Mexico City. So how do we, how do you feature dishes that call out those very, very authentic flavors? Important. I think the other part of it that is critical too is labeling, right? In Spanish. I think that's important because I think doing so sends a signal to Hispanics that you understand their needs and you're really doing the right thing to cater to them. So it's not necessarily checking the box. It's really about I'm making this meaningful investment, a meaningful effort to try to connect and build a relationship with that consumer that values a lot of relationships and honestly are very loyal to brands that value that, that values them and get them. So those are some things that are very important. Like I mentioned, packaging, labeling in Spanish is critical. Authentic flavors, those are really, really key things to be considered.
Jose, I have one more question for you.
You bet.
Is the promotion solely focused on retail products, or is there a food service component to it as well?
Yeah, so right now it's very heavily consumer focused, and then we're also working with retailers, like I mentioned. So that's primarily where it is. We do have a food service team that always takes the work that we're doing and they work with distributors, whether it's to give them ideas about specific flavors or cuts that are being used in this market. So we have that aspect working with distributor or food service operators, but primarily it's very focused on the consumer space and the retail space.
Jose, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you for your time.